This is Sanctuary Mountain Maungatautari. On the North Island of mainland New Zealand, you can step back in time to experience the native and natural flora and fauna of what New Zealand once was like all over. But also, this is the largest pest-proof fence project on the entire planet, and recently it welcomed back a native superstar. This is the critically endangered Kakapo. It was once thought to be extinct, but after locating some in remote parts of New Zealand, their population currently stands at a meagre 247. Charismatic, flightless chunk of a parrot, the Kakapo has seen its population rise over the years thanks to hard work by the Department of Conservation and the Kakapo Recovery Programme, but also to a selection of small predator-free islands. Anchor Island and Codfish Island are the only islands that have Kakapo roaming them today, but there have been others used in the past. Until July 2023, there was absolutely no chance to see a wild Kakapo unless you worked for the Department of Conservation or got special access to the islands. But then it all changed, and now there is a slither of chance to see a wild, living Kakapo. So check this out. I am inside Sanctuary Mountain Maungatautari, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's so cool to be in this enclosure, this giant predator-free enclosure, where everywhere I look there are silver ferns, native New Zealand trees, and it's just untouched forest. One of few untouched forests left in New Zealand, and it's fully protected. Here at the mountain sanctuary, 47 kilometers of predator-proof fence have gone in to protect the native fauna of New Zealand. And there's one right in front of me. What you can hear, making that almost laughing call, is a saddleback, also known as a tieke. And they're really good looking. The saddleback, or tieke, is another native and endemic bird to New Zealand, and it too has had a bit of a hard time. It was once in abundance across New Zealand, but when the European settlers introduced rats, cats and stoats, by the 1890s the mainland population of North Island saddleback was gone. They could only be found on Hen Island, which is a small island just off the Northland coast. And as time went on, these birds were translocated to other islands and then to mainland sanctuaries like Maungatautari, where they could live their life without fear of predators. It's a similar story for a lot of New Zealand's native wildlife, and it's only now that the effects of the recovery are really starting to show. Now, not only do they have the tieke or saddleback here in the mountain sanctuary, they've also got something extremely special, and that is the Kakapo. Lovable and world famous, these Kakapo have often made headlines for their antics, and I'm sure most of you watching this will have seen this clip in particular.
You are being shagged by a rare parrot.
Since the Kakapo Recovery Programme was created in 1995, where there were 51 known Kakapo alive, they've managed the population carefully, and now there are 247 alive today. It may not sound like a dramatic increase, but while the Kakapo can live to ages thought to be near 80, they only attempt to breed every 3 to 5 years, and only when the rimu tree produces a big fruit harvest. Before humans entered the scene, this was probably fine, and on the predator-free islands, it sort of still is. Now, one of the reasons for this groundbreaking move over into the mainland of New Zealand is because these predator-free islands are nearly at capacity. Now, since the 1970s, where these Kakapo were rediscovered, they've been moved over to predator-free islands, and the population has increased really well. But it's getting to the point now where there are actually too many of them on these predator-free islands. So there needs to be contingency plans, and there needs to be something where they go. Now, this place is one of the largest predator-proof enclosures on the entire planet, and it's taken a bit of work to get it up to that standard. Sanctuary Mountain wasn't designed specifically for the Kakapo, but instead for New Zealand's native wildlife in general. There is a north and south enclosure that were first built in 2003, and then the gigantic perimeter was finished in 2006. From there, poison was dropped in areas to eliminate the introduced animals like stoats, rats, pigs and hedgehogs. And in 2007, the sole remaining introduced animal were mice. And even with more attempts to get rid of the mice, it was concluded that in 2011 it was too difficult to eliminate them, so now they just monitor them carefully. But with this success, animals were added to the sanctuary, including the North Island saddleback and Kakapo, kiwi, tuatara, and the once thought extinct takahe. Kaka used to visit the sanctuary anyway, but since the fence has gone in, they have now become residents to the area. So as you can see, Sanctuary Mountain has done a fantastic job, and due to its size being nearly 3 times bigger than the islands in which the Kakapo are on, it could be used as a great way to expand the Kakapo range. So in July 2023, that happened. 10 male kakapo were released to live wild in the main enclosure of Sanctuary Mountain. Now the kakapo that have been added here have been added for a trial run, to see how it goes, to see how it works, to see what they're like in their new environment, and to ultimately see how they react. And if they start to cool, if they start to try and perform on their leks, then females will start to be added. And here at the Mountain Sanctuary, you could get the first chick born on the mainland in well over 50 years. And there are a few benefits to being on the mainland of New Zealand. One, it creates a load of interest for public, people like myself, who will come to these areas in the hope that you may hear or you may see a kakapo, because before this point, it's just pretty much impossible. Now, the public being able to see them isn't the only thing of interest. Being on the mainland means you can get here quicker, because before you weren't really able to do that. You weren't really able to just hop over to an island and go and have a look. Before this, and still while they're doing it, you have to get a helicopter or a plane to some of these predator-free islands. It's quite expensive. That expense of flying helicopters and planes everywhere can be more cost effective at the sanctuary by being able to get here with just a car. Now, the rangers that look after the kakapo here in the Mountain Sanctuary are on call 24/7, and there's been a few cases where they've needed to be. Like with most trial runs of things, there have been a few hiccups along the way. Out of the 10 fellas that were introduced here, only 4 remain as of filming this. And no, it's not a total disaster and they aren't dead. They were just extremely inquisitive, like all parrots are, and they managed to find their way out of the enclosures. Any kakapo found to have exited the enclosures twice were then translocated back to the islands. In January, kakapo Elwyn had escaped the sanctuary and was found in the early hours of the morning by a truck driver. The truck driver had caught it in the headlights and reported that the kakapo had hidden its head under his wing from the light. He then rang the Department of Conservation and told them of this escapee. They then chased after the kakapo and found him hiding behind a building at a school. But if you think about that for a minute, that truck driver is probably the first average person to see a wild kakapo on the mainland of New Zealand in 50 years. It's not totally understood how the kakapo are getting out, but the main theory is this. They've climbed up some trees and just took a big leap for it, and they found themselves on the outside of this fence in farmland, and they've had to be placed back inside. So the hiccups are there, but that's the whole point of a trial, right? Is this suitable, and what adjustments need to be made? But if the kakapo are already outgrowing their islands, what happens if Sanctuary Mountain is successful and they outgrow that? The ultimate goal for this, though, is eventually these kakapo can be released back into the wild. But there's a long time until that can happen. There's a lot more to do until that can go on. Now, one of the big things in New Zealand is predator-free 2050. It's a long way off. There's a lot to do, but essentially it's about trapping and getting rid of the introduced mammalian predators from the land in the hope that they can then expand all the native fauna back. Now, I'm not overly sure if this will happen by 2050 on both the North and the South Island, but there is somewhere in particular that could be of use by 2050, and that is Stewart Island. And that would be the truest test. Can they get all of those introduced predators free, eradicated from Stewart Island, and then in places like this, there could be kakapo roaming free once again like they used to do years and years ago. Stewart Island is massive. It's actually bigger than certain countries like Singapore, Guadeloupe and the Faroe Islands. It once housed the kakapo, and some of them alive today were found there in the last century. But Stewart Island has introduced predators all over it, so the kakapo aren't guaranteed their safety there. Unless by 2050 it can become predator free. There are little islands around there already that actually are, like Codfish where the kakapo currently reside. But one massive step to ensuring the recovery and continued survival of the kakapo would be to make Stewart Island predator free. And places like Sanctuary Mountain are a big step to help in that, and while I didn't get to see or hear one, it was nice to know that I was among them and the possibility was there.